Well, also, you're not friendly to emerging trends like natural medicine. This could be a state that allows, I mean, there's no very little legal natural medicine in the whole country. People have to travel to 1 or 2 states, or they have to leave the country and go for medical tourism to be able to get natural remedy, actual cancer treatments and natural medicine. And that should happen very easily in this state.
And not only that, natural medicine could be considered a small business. It might be a large industry, but the people who practice it typically do so in a small setting. And that brings us to small business. You know, the small business people don't have the luxury sometimes, like large businesses, of saying, we're going to move to Tennessee and South Carolina, etc. Typically, they're 3rd and 4th generation family-owned businesses. Some of their employees have worked for them for 30 and 40 years. We've lost 15,000 of them in the last 18 months. Men and women who've had to look across the table and say to Joan and Betty and Bob, I'm sorry, I can't afford to keep you here anymore. And then have had to close their doors themselves. Yes?
Do you have any good news?
We are getting there. Well, here's the good news in all seriousness. And not to get corny about it, but all of you folks who live in Canaan, we live here for a reason. I'm sure many people, maybe most of the people in this room, have a choice where they could live. We live here for a reason. We find it a beautiful state. Our families are here. I am blessed with a 93-year-old father and an 88-year-old mother. I don't want to leave them. I have 3 children and hope to have grandchildren. I grew up here. You folks grew up here. We started our businesses here. We raised our kids here. We love the climate here. It's a beautiful state. That's the good news. Do we have the ability to get back there? You're damn right we do. Excuse my French. We do. But we got to change a path here. The governor, in his budget that he put forth, increased spending over the 2 years by 9.6%. Though he claimed he had no new taxes, I indicated to you the taxes that he extended out. And here's the biggest thing, borrowing. Scott referenced the fact that 11% of our $20 billion budget every year just goes to pay interest. Interest, it doesn't educate a kid, doesn't cure a patient, doesn't build a road, doesn't build a school, it goes to interest. Historically, we borrowed in an annual time anywhere between $1.2 and $1.4 billion a year for things like school construction, bridges, road repair, etc. The governor proposes $2.9 billion in borrowing for the first year of his biennium and $2.9 billion in the second biennium. That comes with a price tag. Yes, ma'am.
The borrowing that Connecticut has on its books, 2 questions. How much of it is fixed rate, where historically fixed rates, a lot of people, I think, this time you lock it in. And is the borrowing for capital projects? Or are we talking about TANs and BANs rolling over an operating deficit? Because if it's in fact capital projects, it is in some ways educating a kid. I mean, there's a difference here. I mean, it's like in our houses, you know, you pay for your mortgages.
No, you're right.
How much of the borrowing, and I agree, 11% is a very high debt burden, I know that. But how much of the borrowing is really going down for capital projects? And is it fixed? Great debt.
First of all, the rates that we borrow money at vary. Some are fixed rates short term, some are fixed rates longer term, some are variable rates. I could not tell you how much is which. And that's pretty typical, I guess, from any state.
It is.
It's very typical. With regard to your second question, it varies. For instance.
But is Connecticut allowed to borrow for operating expenses?
No, but we do it every day. No. Let me tell you how we do it, okay? We will build a school. We go out to bond to borrow money to build a school. The bill after the school is built hasn't come in yet. We've already borrowed the money. It goes into that cash pool. The money's just sitting there because the bill for the building of the school didn't come in. So we use that money to pay the light bill and the salaries. Now, it used to all work out in the wash because the amount of money coming into the cash pool was equal to the amount going out in the cash pool. That's no longer the case, and that's why the cash pool is so low. So what the governor did is borrow $750 million just to put in the cash pool to pay our operating expenses. Now you asked another question, is some of it for capital expenses? Yes. Let me give you an example of one. We as a state are leveraging $500 million roughly by taking $100 million of our state money to build a busway that is 9 miles long from the city of New Britain to the city of Hartford. I would defy that that educates one kid. That doesn't educate anybody. And those are the kind of things that we are doing time and time again. I'm just going to pause here and introduce Senator Tony Boucher.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry to be so late. Rush off the house. Good to see you.
And Tony will be joining us in our budget explanation. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, someone was just asking about good news, but I guess you've been talking about, I guess, the fact that we still have large deficits, but yet you started out by saying that when Malloy took over, we were $3.6 billion in deficits, and now you're telling us that we got the deficit down to the hundreds of millions, which still is a deficit, but it sounds like it's down by about like $3 billion. So
No, actually, what I said is, he came in the January facing $3.6 billion.
Right.
2 years later, we're in the January facing $1.6 billion, $1.2 billion. Next year, $1.3 billion. Is it less than 3.6? You bet it is.
Okay.
One factor we didn't add. We gave them $1.8 billion to bring it down. And we're still on a trajectory for an ever-growing deficit. And the problem is, the toolkit that he had when he started 2 years ago has been depleted because, as the gentleman said, we can't lay off a person. We can't cut a wage. That was part of the 4-year deal he made with the unions. So it's like the toolbox that you use to fix these problems has been depleted. And therefore, I would submit to you that though the numerical number is less than it was 2 years ago, the actual challenge is far greater. Plus, we paid $1.8 billion the first year, $1.8 billion the second year. That's a total of $3.6 billion extra dollars of revenue that he had. Somebody had their hand up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for all of this. It's very interesting, but we've gone through just about an hour and a half meeting, and I think a lot of us would like to get on the gun control issue.
We're going to get there. We'll get there. We're almost done.
We can do one more on the budget issue.
Sure.
Keep going.
Well, we're not done. I wanted to turn it over to Tom to talk about our unfunded liabilities and our vehicle taxes. And sir, let me tell you, I'll stay here till midnight, talk about guns.
We could do that.
Right, but we came here to talk about the budget and guns, and we're going to do it this way, and then it's open floor.
Am I correct that the mayor or the governor and his party have a veto control on the legislature?
Veto control, I'm
Yes.
In
sorry.
other words, they can veto
Yes.
whatever.
Yes, a 2/3 majority in the
Two-thirds
House and
majority, right.
Senate.
Now,
That's correct.
They do not have that.
Now, given that political reality, I have two questions. All right, one, do you see any cooperative spirit from that side in solving these problems that was maybe different than in previous years? And two, if we cut taxes and that sort of thing, i.e. revenue, aren't we going to go into either further debt and become a catch-22? So what is your solution if there was cooperation?
If there was cooperation, one of the things, various things we proposed is first focus on the spending side, meaning we spend less money.
How?
Where?
Education?
We can spend less money by a whole host of ways. Number one, we shouldn't be borrowing as much as we are to pay that kind of debt service. Number two, we currently deliver services, for instance, social services. We're one of only 2 states that does it by private providers and a state agency. We should be privatizing those services because they're done more efficiently, more effectively. The governor himself agrees with that, but has not done that.
We do have flexibility.
I think we have some flexibility, yes.
All right, I know what you guys want. A lot of you want to get on the gun, so I'll do my 5 slides in 30 seconds. Okay? We've got $66 billion in unfunded mandates. Okay, it's the third worst in the country, and the governor who had opposed when he was a mayor, he opposed the elimination of the vehicle tax. Now, you think, why are we opposed to the elimination of the vehicle tax? We are not opposed to elimination of the vehicle tax. We're just opposed to the governor mandating it and not giving the money back to the towns, because New Canaan would be hit for $3.5 million and they'd have to figure out where to get the money. So what the idea was, the Republicans wanted to have that money come back from the state's going to eliminate that vehicle tax, because ultimately, unless the town cuts services by $3.5 million, the taxes have to go up locally. So with that, I'm done with my spiel, because I know what you guys want to get to your...
Are you going to put those slides on a website somewhere?
Yes, we'll try and arrange that. I'll give you my card and try and get them to you, okay?
Before we leave the issue of the budget, Moody's has made it, and S&P also have made it infinitely clear to Connecticut that they do not approve of borrowing for capital purposes or intent of capital purposes and paying for general fund expenses. Accounting standards are so loosey-goosey at the state level that all that cash, as Representative Cafero was earlier saying, goes into one pool. It gets mixed up. It can be used for whatever purpose. So to me, frankly, it's scary when the governor goes out and says we're going to become that much more GAAP compliant by borrowing $750 million and not admitting that that's there to cover a cash shortfall, as we know in the private sector, as a cash crunch. And also, in the last 3 months, the state has arranged for an emergency line of credit with J.P. Morgan for $550 million. I'll leave you with that.
Okay. We have to get a woman's perspective this evening as well. And again, I'm sorry I wasn't here for the beginning of the presentation. You heard the whole budget discussion, and we'll certainly stay around longer to talk about issues in the Finance Committee. I also have, besides the Finance Committee with Scott France, I also am on the Education, Higher Ed, Transportation Committee as ranking member of those committees, as well as being a co-chair, which is unusual for a Republican, luckily, and I thank Representative Larry Cafero, who's our minority leader in the House, for allowing the Senate also to participate this evening. Thank you, Larry, for letting us join you. It is their forum this evening. But as ranking member of those 3 committees, I can just tell you that I was late because we were screening some bills, and I was able to get the tolling bill to be reduced to a study bill. You're welcome. And then also, we were able to move aside, except that they do still want to pass out a bill with tolling for the improvements on Route 11. Some of us feel that that's the nose under the tent. They haven't convinced us yet that that's the right way to go, given the highest gas tax in the country, unless they want to replace that gas tax. So that's one of the discussions. One other very controversial bill was providing undocumented immigrants with a legal license. And that was a massive controversy debate. We had a public hearing in New Haven, and you can imagine the outpouring of individuals. I believe that we also have moved that aside temporarily until next year in the event that the federal government moves on that issue, and thereby we would not have to engage in something which I would consider is not a legal process right now. So that's one of the controversial issues. And as far as the gun bill, I believe that Representative Cafero is going to start that off, and I can talk about my chairing one of those 3 committees.
Thank you. Get into the gun bill, I'll wrap up the budget. Where are we with regard to that? As I indicated before, what we presented to you is what the governor has presented to the legislature. The legislature is now, the various committees of cognizance, finance, and appropriations, trying to craft a bipartisan, if possible, solution or alternative to what the governor has done. If that cannot happen, something's going to happen, because we have to have a budget. But what happens typically, if we can't agree, the Democrats will propose their budget, Republicans will propose our budget, and we vote ours. That concludes the budget portion, and I'm glad to ask any questions, and then we'll start with guns. Yes?
Yes, sir. We've been talking all about where the money is going, but there is a lot of money spent on transportation issues across the state, and I'm one of the members of the town on the Southwest Regional Planning Agency. Our highest priority, really, for this year is to have the New Canaan branch line improved, so there's passing. We have trees falling down the line, it gets closed down, we have commuters going into the city, trying to get into the city every single day. We think that's way, way overdue, and so with so many members of transportation committees right here present in this room, I really hope that you will make that a major priority in maybe diverting some of the funds to highways in different parts of the states and putting it into mass transit right here in this town. Thank you.
And may I say, certainly, Senator Boucher, and I know Tom O'Day and Senator France have made it a priority to do exactly what you're saying, not just to bring the bacon home to New Canaan, but because they realize that is an economic engine, that is an investment that comes back and pays us in many, many ways. So you're sure that your voice is heard, certainly by these individuals. Ladies and gentlemen, let's start to transition into the Sandy Hook response. As you all know, the tragedy of the likes of which none of us have ever seen in the state of Connecticut occurred on December 14th. In the wake of that, we took a new General Assembly, got sworn in on January 9th. The governor announced that he was forming a commission, what he called the Sandy Hook Commission, to look into the areas of mental health, to look into the areas of school safety, and to look into the area of gun violence. They have held 5 meetings so far, and at the outset the governor said that this task force should not rush to judgment, that it should take their time and report out at the end of March, with the anticipation that he would take their recommendations, put them into a form of legislation which would go through the process. Simultaneously with that, the legislature, controlled by Speaker of the House Brendan Sharkey, President Pro Tem of the Senate Don Williams, reached out to myself and my counterpart in the Senate, Senator John McKinney, and wanted to form a bipartisan task force on gun violence, school safety, and children and mental health. The rules of this thing were, listen, obviously they were the majority party. They have the right to pass and the power and the numbers to pass any bill they want at any time. But they said what we want to do is show the world that we can, at least on some things, come together and have bipartisan consensus. So what we did is we divided those 3 categories into 3 working groups of equal numbers. 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats on the Mental Health Subcommittee. 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats on the School Safety Subcommittee. 8 Republicans, 8 Democrats on the Gun Violence Subcommittee. The entire makeup of the group, including leadership, was 52 members. Those 3 groups, each appointed from each party,